Hello, I am Shaun of the Lore Hunter, and this is part 2 of my two-part series discussing the upcoming Death's Gambit DLC with lead designer Jean Canellas. In part 1, we discussed the development of the DLC and how it is expanding the story and world of Death's Gambit. In part 2, we discussed the gameplay and mechanics of the DLC, including new enemies and bosses, and how the DLC is changing the gameplay in fundamental ways. As a small technical note, there is some minor interference in Jean's audio, but I don't think it gets in the way of what is most important, which is the discussion, which I think is excellent and informative. And with that, let's get into it. We're rolling into the gameplay and mechanics section, and I think, as we're getting into mechanics, it seems like the first thing I wanted to ask you about, because it seems like it's perhaps one of the biggest impacts, is that you're adding a number of Metroidvania sort of inspired abilities. Could you explain these abilities and sort of what inspired you to lean into the Metroidvania aspect of Death's Gambit?
Well, I think one thing our game needed to do better was exploration and just finding more secrets and finding, I love when in Dark Souls or even Hollow Knight when you're just exploring and you find a whole new optional area. Um, I love that feeling, and it's something that Death's Gambit didn't
Mhm.
have simply because we just didn't have enough. Originally we didn't have the budget to make a massive world with tons of optional areas. Now we do. so, so we wanted these power ups to help you to make you want to go back to an area you've been to and explore again and find new items and also potentially find new areas. Um, they also help in terms of creating new boss mechanics. I know the Kusith boss fight we
Mm.
now designed it around the fact that you have double jump. So you have to
Okay,
double jump
awesome.
over his lightning attack, which he doesn't spam constantly. He gives you just enough time to double jump over it, for
Okay.
example.
It sounds cool to sort of take these Metroidvania pieces and work them into the gameplay, because that was one of the things that I was most curious about, seeing that because we have there's the double jump, you have air dash, dive kick, crash down, like a number of these abilities, and I was very curious sort of how these like retroactively work into the gameplay, especially with things that
Yeah.
already exist.
Yeah, I mean, we've had to change the world because of these things.
Mhm,
Alduin, for example, you get double jump from the bulwark. We've explained this before. So
mhm.
Alduin then, you know, forces you to use the double jump in a lot of a
Okay.
lot of the changes that we've done to that level. Um, and double jump is amazing. It's helped us, design a lot of cool enemy ideas. Design levels a little bit less, scared of, oh well, the players have really a short hop. So
Mhm.
now that the player has a double jump, we can kind of design levels a little bit easier because of
Yeah.
that. We have other mechanics too. The crash down, particularly if you find like sigils on the ground somewhere, that means you can crash down on it, and that'll open a hidden area there. And it's just one way of us to hide little nooks and crannies in the world. Um, the dive kick is actually a talent point. It's
Okay.
optional, um, and we heard players really want to do a full kick playthrough, and you can now do that because before your kick wouldn't hit like aerial enemies or you know it had a lot of places where you couldn't hit enemies, like
Yeah.
the final phase of the Thunder Lord, for example. But you could just dive
Yeah.
kick him now.
Okay. Awesome.
Um, Dive kick also parries dash attacks for enemies, which is actually really insanely hard to do,
Yeah, I can
but
imagine.
but it's fun. It makes you look like a badass, and
Yeah.
it hits a little bit harder than the regular parry.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the GIF with Endless, and I was like, how many times did he have to try and set that up? Because it looks really badass. So I'll
Yeah.
probably die a whole bunch trying to do that. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I also have a couple. I think these are just sort of items, but I was curious about them. There's warp bombs, which I know sort of
Yes.
exist in the game, and then there's also bear traps. I wasn't sure if those were sort of part of this Metroidvania thing or just a greater set of options.
Bear trap is one of the new optional abilities you can just find in the world.
Okay.
We wanted it to have an ability, um, a generic ability that players could use um, right after getting to the hub. And so you can find that fairly early now, and you can
Okay.
put that as your third ability slot no matter what class you are. Um, and yeah, you can use it's different from all the other abilities. It doesn't use soul energy, but you
Mhm.
have about 5 uses and they regenerate at a save point.
Okay, that sounds very cool. That's a cool way to sort of um evolve what the abilities sort of can do is their thing. Just because I really enjoy the abilities as is, but it's cool to have sort of a more utilitarian option.
Yes, yeah, this one's a little bit different. I mean, my whole goal with this one was that you could potentially burst down, say, one enemy that was giving you a lot of trouble, but then you
Yeah.
run out of that ability,
Okay.
um, and you have to, take that trade off.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds very cool. And the warp bombs is that
That's
just
a that's
a
definitely a
button?
Metroidvania upgrade.
Okay.
So what we're doing is all the old warp bombs, um, don't work anymore. If you've
Okay.
bought a bunch, you actually can use them and regain the experience points that you used to buy them.
Okay.
But but you find in the world now a a essentially endless warp bomb creator to let you use it anywhere infinitely, and it lets you
Okay.
access a lot of new nooks and crannies in the world.
Oh, that sounds very cool. I'm playing through as an assassin right now, and the blink, I think it's called blink ability,
Yeah,
is just I just love that in games. Like I'm a big Dishonored fan, so just the idea of like I'm here and now I'm over there, and just the way to play with that sounds like a lot of fun for exploration.
I
Yes,
agree. It's definitely my favorite upgrade. I don't think I've seen another Metroidvania with like warp bombs.
yeah, no, that sounds like a very cool addition. Do you think that these abilities options sort of change sort of the difficulty of the game just because it does feel to me like I come in as like a big Souls fan, and definitely with things as they are in the base game now, I definitely get a lot of sort of Souls vibes. I depending on my class that I'm playing, I'm either very dodgy or very like shield. And when I'm thinking of this, um and these abilities, this definitely pushes it into making it feel like like playing like Hollow Knight or something, and just the
Yeah.
way I approach those games very differently. So it's very interesting for me to just sort of conceptualize this sort of very my play style right now of being very considerate of my like stamina and sort of patient with things to sort of manage, to this sort of frenetic sort of more Metroidvania combat seems like a really interesting sort of design process to go through.
Yeah. This is a complicated law. This question deserves a long answer. There's a lot in there to unpack.
Yeah.
And I mean, you asked questions about difficulty, whether this makes this easier, whether this is more of a Souls-like or Hollow Knight style game. And again, I love both games. Souls, at the end of the day, is still my favorite, but uh, it's hard to. Okay,
Yeah.
so where to begin? Our game is frame by frame pixel art animated. You know, um, and doing exactly what Dark Souls does in pixel art, frame by frame, is incredibly challenging. I think the only weapon that fully feels very Dark Souls in our game is honestly the Great Hammer. Um,
Mhm.
maybe the axe. The axe kind of feels Bloodborne-y, um, but um, but it's hard to. I don't even know how to explain it without like going into the animations themselves to explain
Yeah.
why. In something like Sultan's Sanctuary, a lot of their attacks are like they have a wind up and then the attack is immediately like almost like one frame and then the attack is
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
In Death's Gambit, like the animations are kind of like say something like a Castlevania game. It
Right.
has the wind up and the attack are kind of it's not like a long wait time and then the attack goes off instantly. It's like
Yeah.
it's a long wait time and the attack lasts a while too. The great sword has a long hitbox that lasts
Mhm.
like 5 frames. In something like Solemn Sanctuary, their hitboxes are probably like 2 frames long.
Yeah.
Part of that is because we're doing animations that are frame by frame and not something that's like animated um, using a program like say Spine.
Mhm.
Um, there's another game which I'm going to shout out. It's called Tarnishing of Juxtia that I've been talking to the dev and explain like I basically went up, messaged him and was like, we had a point in development where we had to decide whether to make our game more Castlevania-like
Mhm.
or more like Tarnishing of Juxtia, which is a very, it's more Solemn Sanctuary.
Okay.
Um, and we decided to go more Castlevania, partly because we didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Um, it's we are doing all of our animations frame by frame. Our game, so that's more. Our game's more blasphemous, more
Mhm.
Castlevania, and that means that it won't ever, in my opinion, fully feel uh, perfectly Dark Souls. That's nothing
Yeah.
bad. I want, I wish and we're
Yeah.
going and striving for that, but it won't perfectly feel like that. Our game
Yeah.
will, at the end of the day, still feel somewhere in between that and Hollow Knight, um,
Yeah.
because of that. Um, it's I don't think it brings it down or anything. It's just this that's what the play style of the game is like now, and we're just sort of embracing it. I would actually say it feels more like Sekiro
Hmm.
now.
I've seen you share a few things about the perfect blocks, and instantly reminded me of Sekiro. And I was curious if that do you still have the sort of parry? Is
Yeah,
is this an additive so you sort of have options of if you want to do a perfect block or if you want to try parrying an enemy, or how does that work
yeah.
now?
Now we have like three parries. Um, we have the original parry,
Okay.
and you have a perfect block, and you have a dive kick parry. Um, and the regular parry is still stronger because it's more high risk. You
Yeah.
can get hit during the animation. Um, when you're blocking, if you're blocking, you're worst case scenario, you block an attack. Um, best case scenario, you parry it. So it's certainly riskier to do the original parry, so it deals
Okay.
more damage. But the perfect parry is definitely very inspired by Sekiro.
Mhm.
Um, and this goes back to the question of difficulty. Does this make the game easier? Um, and it, in some places I can see that, but we've also worried about it and made sure that, say, bosses, you can't just perfect parry,
Okay.
perfect block, back to back and just kill them. A lot of them
Okay.
have like a perfect block meter. You have to perfect block them multiple times before you can do a retaliation attack, for example.
Yeah. So it almost seems like the game is easier if you happen to be really good at this one thing because you've given more options now for players to maybe find the thing they want to latch on to.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's definitely all about giving the players more options. I think one thing that our original game needed was um, more more timing based skill
Mm.
like more timing mechanics. And
Yeah.
perfect block feels really good. Immediately when we put it in the game, testers at Adult Swim were like, "You better keep this in. This is the best thing you've added
Yeah.
in forever." Um, and everyone who played it with the perfect block loves it over here. So
Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
I'm I'm super happy. It just feels like another way of dealing with enemies. It's just another option. One of the reasons why we have like a shield slot and two weapon slots as opposed to Dark Souls two weapon slots is because I felt like Dark Souls, you know, remove the option of you. If you just want to play through Dark Souls at the optimal setting, you would not equip a shield because you
Yeah.
want to be two handing almost all the time. Um, and we felt like why not just let you have a shield regardless, no matter what
Mhm.
situation.
Sort of speaking of that, you were talking about skill based things. It seems like when the DLC comes out, I may have to try a Blood Knight again because it seems like I'll probably be a lot worse because the ability has sort of changed. So the Blood Knight I thought was cool because like okay, basically a Bloodborne class
Yeah.
because you can get some health back by continuing to fight. But so now the Blood Knight's health regain from attacks only works for abilities now.
Yes.
Okay.
So I tested a lot of stuff, and that is a very hard class to bounce.
Mhm.
Health
Yeah.
regen always is. Um, and ability. Basically, what we did was only abilities heal you back, but it heals you back for way more.
Okay.
Um,
That's cool.
and
Yeah.
for example, if you're the axe class, if you if you time your axe throw really well, you'll basically heal back up to full.
Yeah.
So you just have to make sure you time it right. It requires a little bit more strategy as opposed to you
Yeah.
just face tanking a
Yeah.
boss, and I like strategy.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
that sounds good because one thing about sort of being a sort of DPS class is sort of how I interpreted Blood Knight. Even though I don't know, I think I ended up using slower weapons, which was probably not great. But it was like when you get up to some of the later bosses, you have smaller windows to sort of just whack away at him. So it seems cool to be able to be like, okay, save the throw for after he does this one attack that I'm just really bad at, and I think Amovaro is going to hit me with one of his goddamn dash swipes again.
Yeah.
So just sort of prepare for that, and then know you can throw the axe and get some health back. So it seems like it'll be a change, but it seems like the strategy could actually benefit someone who's being kind of thoughtful, which is pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry for my for my
No.
tangent. We'll get more into the classes a little later. I wanted to before we move off of Metroidvania, I wanted to see learn more about the map that's being added because that's obviously it seems like a relatively big addition to me. Just that you'll have this map now because it just changes how you interface with the game in some ways. So I was just curious what inspired the addition and like sort of what ways you were intending for it to be used.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that because the game is just so huge now, it just
Mhm.
felt necessary.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
we we essentially um, expanded the world uh, to make the game more about exploration, and it's now almost like 40% to 50% bigger. It's not to say that we're adding 50% more content. I I would say we're adding like 35 to 40% more content, but in terms of
Mhm.
world, it's definitely about 50% bigger. And because
Okay.
of that, the map needed to be there to help you out. You can see like where what save points you've accessed through the map. You can place markers for
Okay.
yourself just to see, just to if you want to remember something. Um, you can, yeah. There's a few features we've been working through. Um, one one cool feature that we well actually I don't want to go into that. That'd be spoilers. But anyway,
Sure.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
why.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds cool. And it makes a lot of sense because I mean, if if I'm thinking about Hollow Knight or Blasphemous as sort of recent things, they both involved maps. I love Blasphemous before I say that the map wasn't super helpful in that game, but it was nice to sort of have it to locate me in the world. And as you're, I really like that you have all these. It sounds like a lot of optional areas, which is cool because just as a player, sometimes one thing I like about Death's Gambit as it is now is that I sort of am drawn back to it because I know that it's like a 12 to 20-hour experience maybe, and maybe even faster if I was, pushing myself a little more. But it sounds cool to have all the map to sort of provide you the stuff, but that a lot of it's optional. So if I'm just like inspired one weekend, I can hop on and sort of decide how much I'm going to engage with to sort of get a run through the game.
Yeah, if you still want to play through from beginning to end, uh, and not do the optional stuff, it's pretty much about the same time. But if you want to do
Okay.
everything, it's really big now. It's really, really big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and are a lot of these new optional areas sort of leaning into your like double jump and all these traversal abilities that
Yes.
you now have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much everything new that we made has been, with the knowledge that the player has all these new abilities.
Okay. Is there gonna be a White Palace moment where I'm gonna like rage?
So, um, you're not the first person to ask me that actually. And I do like the idea of like a super hard platforming challenge. And so here's the thing. It's we are working on one, but it's not part of the DLC. It's something that I want to
Okay.
do release after the DLC.
Hmm.
Um, Partly because, well, we'll get into it later. Well, I don't know if I should get into it, but yeah, uh, uh, it's this DLC is huge, and I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out things that would help me ship this a little bit faster, and that's one of the areas that's like, okay, I feel like I could do that after the DLC releases and finish that up, um, and people will be okay with that. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, we do have a ultra platforming challenge area, but it's not coming with the DLC. It's coming after.
Sounds like everything will be sort of at least at my level. I won't have to worry about raging too hard for anything.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hard stuff, but most of it is optional.
Yeah.
Heroic boss
That's
fights.
good.
Um,
Yeah.
the new endings are challenging, um,
Yeah.
but you know they're supposed to feel like a how do you say, like the true ending essentially,
Yeah.
which I think if it feels optional, then it's okay that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not super hard. It's not endless heroic hard. Um, but
Okay.
there is heroic bosses. The heroic bosses for the new endings are going to be definitely endless heroic hard. Um,
Okay.
the normal versions
Yeah.
will be fine.
And
Yeah.
now that sounds great. I can sort of chew on a boss. It's my own personal uh challenge of just being terrible at platforming in some ways, but I do love having the double jump So I love having the Metroidvania abilities. I just am not always great at when they push my limits. It was actually for Blasphemous, which is it's a game I've covered on the channel and is a game I really love, but it doesn't have a double jump. And I'm like, every game needs a double jump, just because the joy of just traversing and just popping up in the air is just good. So I'm really excited for the double
I
jump here.
really regret not adding it to the original game.
Mm.
And
Was it a consideration at
here's
in the
here's
base
the
game?
thing. I just wanted to make the game very Dark Soulsy, and I felt like
Yeah,
Metroidvania upgrades weren't a Dark Souls thing. Um,
yeah.
and when the game released, I just stopped being as stubborn, and I realized actually a lot of our fans are Metroidvania fans. They're not
Mhm.
just Souls fans. Um, and even if you look, one of the things that frustrated me was when I saw like stuff like the IGN review. They were just like
Oh, yeah.
they gave us a really bad review, and they were clearly inspired by Symphony of the Night, which we weren't. I was
Yeah,
inspired by other. Actually, I was inspired more by like Castlevania's Order of Ecclesia is one of my favorites, um,
okay.
and Dark Souls specifically. I tried my best to not be a Metroidvania and to be as Dark Souls as
Yeah.
possible, and that kind of bit us in the ass. So
Yeah, well, not to, talk bad about IGN, but that video I was watching reviews, a little bit ago because I was just I was like, "I have to return to Death's Gambit." I went away, I played through some other games, and I just wanted to return after playing through it at the beginning of the year, and I was like, "Oh, I'll look up some reviews," and the IGN review, I was, like, halfway through, and I was like, "This person doesn't like this genre," and then
yeah,
I looked down just at the comments, as you do once you start to, like, feel like something's, either really great or really bad, and I was like, it had one of the worst, like, ratios of
yes,
upvote to downvote, and all the comments were like, "Did you even try?" So, not to
yeah. No, that
not to
review
shit
was
on
bad.
IGN, but that it just seems, these games, and you have to come to it sort of being, like, willing to engage, and I think there's a lot of crossover between Souls fans and Metroidvania fans, as one, like, I love the Souls games, and it's partially because it took me back to, like, Super Metroid, like, just some of that feeling of exploration, and so I'm very excited to hear that you're leaning into the exploration because I think that's probably the easiest, maybe not easiest, but that's the thing that can be most common between, like, a 2D Metroidvania and, like, a 3D Dark Souls game is the sense of exploration is something you can really evoke even with
Yeah,
the change in the design.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I had to really go back to the core of why I love Metroidvanias in the first place, and
Yeah.
I think originally I was just thinking too high level and thinking too advanced. I was focused on making really complex boss fights,
Mhm.
while a lot of the basics of the Metroidvania genre weren't really being satisfied, and
Okay.
that's kind of what we're looking at the DLC.
Okay, yeah, and actually, speaking of bosses, there's going to be a number of new bosses in the DLC, and so with these ones, sort of following off of that, is what can you tell us about them as far as like, was there were these a mixture of concepts that you wanted to try, or
Yeah,
was it unused ideas or new concepts, or was there any sort of theme with these new bosses that you wanted to do?
there's only so I'll try to give some hints. There's only one
Sure.
boss that's like completely new that we came up through the DLC, and that boss was basically the idea with that boss was trying to come up with something as humanly cool as possible that could
Okay.
that could be good for a trailer, and that uses a lot of the Metroidvania upgrades. The rest of the bosses are most of them are either scrapped ideas or um, and or characters that we felt would make good boss encounters. Um,
Mhm.
there's also some I would say so this DLC has I'll just say one quick hint. Um, most of the DLC bosses are characters that have been mentioned or
Okay.
that we have seen in the game. Um, and uh, there's still some bosses that, uh, and then there's actually that's now I'm backtracking here. There's also some bosses that you haven't heard of and are completely new. So there's a little bit of both.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and and so yeah, that sounds pretty cool because one of the one of the things that really drew me in with Death's Gambit was I wouldn't say gimmick is the right word, but it's felt like each boss definitely had like a really strong idea behind them. Like, just to put like Auriga is one of like the most creative bosses I've seen in a long time. Just like really loved not only the fact that it was like this crazy sort of anachronistic moment, but just also that like it's just a cool idea for the fight. And I love watching like you're like watching her fire off her shots and then you know she can't fire the next shot, so you just sort of stand out there and you're just like, like sort of like a cool like badass like come get me moment because you know she's just gonna have to jump down. So I'm very excited to see
That's awesome.
what happens with the bosses, just knowing like how strong the concept was. So it's I hear that you spend a lot of sort of time on the bosses and you're sort of leaning in the Metroidvania now. So it's kind of cool because for me at least, I thought the bosses were very conceptually strong in a way that there wasn't too much just like okay just like run around and smack them a whole bunch. There was stuff to consider, whether it's Bulwark with the ads or Amovaro with everything that he does. Just very strong bosses that sort of like left an impression. There's not I really don't think that I felt like there was any that were just like guy with shield sort of moments.
Yeah, I try to stray away from that a little bit. I
Yeah.
well, first of all, that's amazing, and thank you. I mean, uh, I do still think our bosses are the best part of our game, and we think about them all the time. Um, I specifically, I'm constantly thinking of how to make the next best boss battle ever. And
Yeah.
so, um, Orga was an example of one that even, all of our bosses have like a million ideas thrown in, and we just keep the ones that we can. Origa was one that, you know, we even had when we had like online elements, there was an idea where you could originally put notes on the ground like in Dark Souls. So what if
Mhm.
the notes were gravestones and you have to use other players' notes to block the sniper
Yeah.
shots? I still think
Yeah,
about that to this day and
that's
was
cool.
like, that would have been the most unique thing ever in a game.
Yeah.
But
No, that's a very cool concept. Yeah, and it definitely reminds me of a few like, yeah, it feels like very Dark Souls in the sense of like the community passively helping you.
yes,
Sort of, that yeah, that is a very cool
if
idea.
we
I
had
guess
a
that's one
huge
to
budget, we
keep in
would
the
have done
pocket.
it. Um,
Yeah, well, I'm sure adding online and stuff that's a whole nother
it was
realm.
scary. If we ever make a sequel, I would do it. But
Yeah.
yeah. So as for the new bosses, I think I looked at what bosses fans like the most.
Mhm.
And we just decided, let's do that. Let's do more of that. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking of stuff like Amovro, Endless, um, things like Bulwark, um, and a lot of our new bosses are very much like those. They're
Okay.
they're very they test a lot of your basic skills of the game, and they have a lot of moves, and they're very Dark Soulsy. Um, which I'm glad because in my opinion, those are honestly some of the easiest bosses to make. The hardest bosses to make are are the ones where I tried all kinds of crazy ideas and everyone just finds really gimmicky, like Eldritch Council or like Thunderlord, um, where there's just a lot of weird stuff going on.
I will support you in the fact that I don't dislike the Eldritch Council as much as the internet might like make people think is the common like it's a DPS thing and but I feel like I felt really efficient when I beat the Eldritch Council. Like when I beat
Nice.
the Eldritch Council, I feels like I did everything right, which I feels like a good feeling to inspire in the player. Like, oh, I shouldn't have popped that ability then because it slowed me down. I should have,
Yeah,
it sort of made me think on this sort of minute level about how I was approaching things. So I have a little bit of a soft spot for the Eldritch Council just because it does feel I mean, I guess there are a fair number of bosses that I sort of go for DPS with, but that one sort of challenged like it was the most pure as far as like can you input things correctly? Can you be efficient?
yeah.
And that's just like a different way to put in my head versus the more tactical approach that I end up taking a lot of times.
I definitely have a soft spot for bosses like that too, which are about
Yeah.
finding efficiencies and how to improve things.
Yeah.
Bisurge is another one that's kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but Bi-Surge is one I always have so much trouble with. It's mostly because I'm too impatient when you're alternating colors to like I just want to keep getting in there, even though I know that it's going to lead to me making a few mistakes and getting hit. Which it's sort of like it's kind of both an endurance test and a DPS, at least how I've approached it before, because like you want to jam as much damage in when you're also your most vulnerable, which means it makes sense to sort of hang back and maybe dodge around a little bit more when you're alternating, when you're the same sort of color. But it's just I'm just too impatient with those things, and I end up just getting myself hit by that blast because I'm just getting greedy.
That's amazing.
So
I mean, that's how it was intended to work. So
yeah.
so speaking of Bi-Surge, we've done a lot of changes to things, and that boss got one change.
Oh.
And basically, if you in Guarded Tomb during the polarity section and during the Bi-Surge boss fight, if you use your Crash Den ability, you actually change polarities yourself.
Oh,
Um,
I've wondered. I actually was like, I was just playing through Bi-Surge the other night, and I was like, I wonder if I'm missing something where I could change color.
well, that's a boss that had too many ideas, and we couldn't get it right. And now I feel like it's much better. Partly because you can now decide, you if you're opposite polarities, you will kill him faster, but you also basically get one shot. um, you get almost one shot. Um, and if you are his same color, you'll kill him slower, but you won't be in that much of a dangerous situation. But yeah, that's kind of the main change there for that
Okay,
boss.
yeah, and sort of leading into a adjacent question was I was curious if you've edited bosses, base game bosses too much, or if you've left most of them as they exist, or if you've made tweaks just to
Yeah.
account for some of the Metroidvania aspects.
So the ones I've gotten changes are Kusith. That's the biggest one. I mean, it's a whole rework. Um, Pfizer's got that one change. Um, Elders Council didn't get anything besides some quality of life improvements in terms of the, some players were confused as to what the orbs that slowly fall down, how do those work? Um, Now there's like a visual aspect that shows. It's hard to explain, but there's a lot of small little things that explain
Okay.
the mechanics of the boss fight a little bit better. Um, the Thunderlord, I want to reveal that a little bit later, but the Thunderlord is getting some changes. He has a new attack, um,
Okay.
and yeah, I'm still tweaking it, which is why I don't want to go into it. Um,
Yeah.
but we are changing. We're doing some changes to Thunderlord as well. The rest are pretty much unchanged. The Phoenix Rider. So the Phoenix Rider is now in a different order in the world. It's no longer the second boss you should do after the Owl King. Um, and so because of that, we had to up her health. Um,
Yeah.
and changed a little bit of how her phase 2 works. Um, so Phoenix Rider is getting some changes. Bulwark is now the intended second boss, so he got some changes too. And there's a section of a level before him now because players felt like it took too long, or no, it felt there was nothing in between the hub save point and the Bulwark. So we added like a level, not a huge level, but a section. Um, because of that, it allows a player to, if you die to the Bulwark, you at least get some experience on the way to him because you're killing some enemies on the way to the Bulwark, which lets you level up even more as you fight him. Um, and it makes the world feel a little bit better because of it. We also had to nerf the Bulwark's health a little bit because of it, simply because you have a level to have to go to get to him now, so it's harder. So we had to nerf his health a little bit, but otherwise, um, that's some of the main changes there. Um,
Okay.
the Phoenix Rider
Yeah.
also getting to the Phoenix Rider also takes a little bit longer. We added a small section, small fire cave area before her now.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that sounds cool. That makes sense because when you're playing, you get through the tutorial into Owl King, and then you're going through
It's like
you
a
get
boss
the
gauntlet.
Phoenix Rider. Yeah, yeah, it does feel like that because usually in my playthrough, it's like, I beat the Tundra Lord as my third boss, and then it's like straight over to Bulwark because it's like the way forward, and there's no way I'm going up into the observatory anytime soon. So.
That's another one that's moved. The observatory is in a completely different place in the world now.
That is very interesting to me just because it's like a big tower. So so I
It's a
I
magical
noticed that and
tower
I
that
was
can
like,
move.
That's why earlier when you're talking about changes, I was like, did Amalvaro do some shit? Is that what's happening? Because it's like, if his whole tower moved, what's going
Amobro
on?
didn't. It isn't really Amobro's, you know.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's cool. It's nice to have the sort of the pacing and for that. So that sounds really interesting. In addition to um, new bosses, there's also some new enemies that'll be featured in the DLC, and we've seen the adorable frog knights and the dryads. What more can you tell us about the new enemies and where we'll find them? Is it mostly in the DLC, or is there new enemies sort of throughout the game?
Sure. I mean, the enemy placements, a lot of have shifted around. I
Okay,
actually, now that you mention it, you had mentioned Scholar of the First Sin. Some areas will feel a little bit like that, where it's like a
okay,
remix of what you played through before. Alduin enemy placements are fairly different. Um,
okay,
for example, Guarded Tomb as well. Guarded Tomb, no, it's half and half there. But yeah, yeah, some of the new enemies are in the old areas, uh, and some of them are in the DLC as well. Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
okay. So it's not just DLC areas with new enemies; it's sort of a remix
Yeah,
throughout the game.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So, I want to get into some of the other huge changes, which is system changes for your character. But before we get into some of the stuff with talents and stuff, you've made some foundational changes to how the character acts in the world with the Metroidvania abilities. But you also tweaked the stamina cost and for all actions. Are there any other changes to core mechanics like that? Are there any tweaks to just the basic function of your character beyond the Metroidvania?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, honestly, the biggest ones are, you have a slide instead of a kick now. It's just
Mm,
completely replaced. It's just a slide. Um,
okay.
and it feels really nice. It feels really good. Like we had
Yeah,
we had some of our testers literally just trying to slide everything to death. Um,
yeah,
it doesn't deal that much damage, so it's not super
okay,
efficient, but you can do it.
yeah,
Um, and the stamina, like you mentioned, it's a little bit better balanced. We had a lot of players complain about it. In my opinion, fans will agree. Stamina was okay if you played right. You just had to
yeah,
use abilities when you were out of stamina. But
yeah,
a lot of players didn't get that, um, and just
okay,
felt like the stamina system was really broken. So we another thing that subconsciously made players feel like the stamina system sucked was every single time you had low stamina, you see a text on top of you that says low stamina. Um,
yeah,
you no longer see that. Now what you see is like a green
okay,
glow around your character, which feels so
okay,
much better. It's kind of like inspired by like Neo. Neo has a similar
mhm,
thing where when you're running out of stamina, you can visually see it. Um,
okay,
and it feels so much better. Another thing is one of the first talent points maxes out your stamina when you use an ability, um,
okay.
which should
Oh, that's cool.
encourage players to use abilities when you're low on
Yeah,
stamina.
yeah, yeah. That sounds cool. Actually, I didn't realize that abilities didn't require stamina initially, and then I think it was just my second playthrough. I was playing the Blood Knight, and it became much more of a thing to manage my stamina because I was going for just trying to get health back and just sort of tank things if I could. So that's when I was like, oh, if I pop this ability, I can do that right at the end of a chain. And then I sort of found, oh, I can almost non-stop attack. I just have to be
Yeah.
a little bit more skill based, a little bit more tactical about how I approach it.
Yes. Which was the intent. It's just a lot of players never learned it, and that's technically our fault by not explaining it well enough.
It is interesting like tweaking the stamina because I can see that being just a really tough thing because Metroidvania stuff isn't really stamina. Like
Yeah.
that's the very much more like the Dark Souls side of things. So I can see that being a really hard thing to sort of, you know, cut the difference. Like you don't want to make it too forgiving because then
Yeah.
it's sort of an unnecessary system. So
Yeah, the stamina meter. I One quick thing I wanted to say about it was I about a month and a half ago I sat down to play the game with a combat designer on God of War, God of War 4, the latest one. And
yeah.
I purposely did it because I just wanted to see what other people thought. I hadn't sat down with another combat designer about it, and and he told me, well, actually, I don't know how I can't go into specifics about it because he did tell me some stuff about God of War or issues they ran into that I probably can't talk about. But he did tell me that a stamina system in that's Gambit, just by having a stamina system, um, players already get stressed out. Even if
Yeah.
even if it's like the most forgiving stamina system, like Solemn Sanctuary, um,
Yeah.
people already feel stressed out about it. And if you play Solemn Sanctuary, you'll realize the stamina system is basically almost impossible to run out of stamina.
Yeah.
It's so forgiving, and I was just like, what? No one complained about it there, and like, but it's like kind of like badly balanced. Whatever, I guess
Yeah.
we'll look at our
Uh,
stamina system and see how to improve it, and yeah,
yeah.
take it from there. But
I've seen that there'll be 20, like at least 20 weapons added, and it seems like maybe that's like the place of the biggest source of like experimentation as far as like maybe some like sort of not wacky stuff, but some sort of like really conceptually strong ideas. Could you talk a little more about like new weapons and sort of how you see them, like what you see these new weapons adding to the game?
yeah, at the beginning I was kind of struggle. Yeah, I struggled a little bit with weapons to figure out what should their purpose be. The first purpose
Hmm.
was, well, first of all, the game just having one type of each weapon felt lame. You wanted to be able to find like, oh, the ultimate boss weapon for each type.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one of the goals, was just to fill that gap there. But um, I also wanted each weapon to add some complexity to your combat. Um, whether it be something as simple as, well, now the Dark Knight Greatsword charges up these like orbs as you attack, and you could consume them essentially whenever you air dash to do like a damaging air dash, um,
Hmm.
which we posted a GIF of on Twitter. It basically transforms you into the Dark Knight for like a few frames as you dash in the
Yeah.
air, and it feels so good.
Yeah. It
um,
looks really cool.
and we just it adds a little bit of complexity there. And sometimes you're like, oh, should I use the air dash now because it'll consume one of like the Dark Knight air dash attack. And it
Mm.
adds just an extra layer of complexity to the combat, which was already super complicated. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was kind of our goal with each weapon. Just either add something, another layer, or have a weapon that that is good for a specific situation. So we have this new
Mm.
tome that we revealed last weekend, which bounces around. You could use that to reach enemies that are like at an angle, maybe. So that
Okay.
fulfills that role, for example. And I think one of the other tomes we haven't revealed like goes through walls, so you could hit enemies through
Okay.
walls
Wow.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the goal.
it's kind of interesting. I haven't done like a magic class, and that was sort of because I had just heard that it was a bit harder at the start, and there was just some of the sort of the abilities of the other classes I was interested in, which with the like assassin, just because I was already dodging. I wanted to challenge myself, but it does seem like did you find that or it seems like the magic class is getting some new tomes. So is there, I guess as a broader question, is there sort of any sort of overhauls to the classes in any sort of significant ways? It doesn't sound like you're not adding any classes, but it sounds like because of the changes, are there some foundational changes in how the classes are sort of meant to operate?
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have any new classes, but we're adding 100 talent points.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of them are class specific, which change up the way you play the game. And so, for example, the wizard has, I think it's like 12, maybe like 11 specific talent points or something like that. And they change up your abilities a little bit. I think one of the last ones is like whenever you finish like a spellblade combo, um, it makes your next, I think it makes your next orb cast like way faster or something like that.
Okay.
Um, I think there's one that makes your like dark fire tome mine that you can place. Like it lets it explode like multiple times, even like after an enemy has hit it. Um,
Okay.
some of them like speed up. I think the one of them speeds up your lightning spell animation. And it feels really nice when you use it now because it's like super fast lightning attacks. Um, stuff like that.
Okay.
And yeah, and you can expect, say, if we add like a new spellblade weapon, it might change up your the way you play a wizard. Which
Okay.
I will say, if you haven't played a wizard, I do recommend it. A lot of we actually have a
Yeah.
lot of fans who say that's the best class by far. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the reason why some people don't go wizard is because wizard kind of sucks in Dark Souls. In my
Yeah.
opinion, they're like kind of lame, and we felt like, okay, well, how can we spice it up? Well, How about
Yeah,
if we do it kind of Magica style and you like can combine different orb elements to create new spells?
yeah.
And I think that really
Okay.
worked.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds awesome. And I'm sort of speaking about the talents. So there's four talent trees now instead of just one. There's the original with some modifications, and then you have your class one. Could you sort of get into what the other ones are and how that sort of progression you see that working?
Yes, there's four talent trees. You start with the first one opened, and it's fairly similar to the original with some tweaks. Um, and then once you beat a certain boss, the class tree opens up. Um, Actually,
Yeah.
no. What am I saying? Sorry. You start with the first two actually, and then when you beat a boss,
Okay.
the third one opens up. So
Okay.
right from the get-go, you could just start putting points into your class-specific talent tree.
Hmm.
And then what happens is you beat a certain boss that activates your third talent tree, and the third talent tree is really cool because you get to choose another class's talent tree as your third talent tree. So
Yeah.
as your specific you know build, you have to decide, okay, what other class do I want their talents, and you can look through all the talents and decide on
Mhm.
your own what
Okay.
type of build you want to go.
Yeah.
And then
That
uh,
blows my mind having that extra. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I just that's one of the things where I'm like, I don't even know how you begin to balance that, or if you even worry about there being like an overpowered thing because it just is such a cool idea. Like you may not be adding classes, but you're essentially adding a ton of classes.
we're gonna balance it in well, first of all, that's why we're gonna do a beta. So we have
Yeah.
fans test out all the talents and make sure nothing is too broken. Um, yeah, it's gonna be hard to balance, but we'll do it.
Yeah.
The original beta showed off a lot of issues, and I've already fixed those.
Mm.
Uh, we'll
Okay. Well, it's a really strong idea, and it's like one of the things where I'm like, your mind just instantly starts going, like not even knowing what's in the class trees, but just being like, just sort of going in those archetypes. Like, are you like, a caster slash, like thief? Like,
yeah.
are you like a paladin? It just all of a sudden generates all these ideas, which is really cool. And then there's this fourth talent tree, which I cut you off from explaining.
Yeah, the fourth talent tree you access it when you beat the main game. So when you beat Endless at the end of the game, you activate the fourth talent tree, which is essentially a like end gamey, uh, more more simplified. It's a little bit more of a simple tree, but you can put in. I don't know how much I should explain. I'll explain it. It's honestly not that big of a deal. Also, you could have seen it in the beta. You basically can like put there's a few talent points where you can put in like 100 talent points in. Um, and the idea is that you you use this one in new game pluses as you keep getting talent points through all the new game pluses. Um, by let's say like new game plus 3 or 4, maybe 5, depending on how many new game pluses you skip. Um, you should have page 1, 2, and 3 complete. And then the fourth page is supposed to last you forever, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that sounds really cool because it sounds like there's about 45 to 50 talent points per playthrough because you sort of added some that you can sort of purchase in the world and some are hidden. So there's
Yeah,
like more talent
yeah,
points now in the DLC.
yes, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that is something I'm very excited for. Just all the possibilities of just builds and playing around because one of the things that keeps me coming back to Death's Gambit is actually just the fact that you have classes, which is funny because it's very much not like a Dark Souls thing to
yeah.
you know create a tired comparison, but it's something that does draw because it just instantly is like, oh, so how's this one work? Okay, it's like if I dodge or if I kill an enemy, that's how I get this, and it's another one of those things where when you think of it, you instantly start just imagining it, and that sort of draws you to like play it because you just can't help but think about what you can do with that.
Yeah, 100%. That was the goal. I I liked how in this wasn't the only inspiration, but I liked how in Silent Sanctuary there was like a nice loop of like, oh,
Mm,
now I
yeah.
can get the next talent point. And here the idea is, whenever you go to a save point, you'll wanna use up your next talent point and see where else, what else cool thing you're gonna get next.
The game as it is now, it's always like you have 2 talent points unspent, and I'm always like, going through the level, and I'm like, oh shit, I have 2 talent points unspent, and but this is because I was really into how the classes function, and then I really like the weapon abilities, and then I'll always forget because I'm sort of as it is now, I sort of am like I'm immediately going for the air dodge because no matter what class I'm playing, I want the air dodge, which sounds like it's just in the world now,
Yes. Yeah.
which is great because that's just one of those things. It's like is a slight comparison to Sekiro. It's like the Makiri, where I'm almost like, why do I have to get the Makiri? Just give me the Makiri. I'm not going to play through the game without having that counter. So I was excited to see that it's just a given because usually that's my first thing. I go straight for that, and then I find the shortest route to my class specific talent. Speaking of weapons, it sounds like also, besides the weapons being added, it sounds like you've done a lot of work on how weapons get upgraded now and how your gear gets upgraded. Could you explain how upgrading gear is going to work now with the DLC?
Sure. So I mean, it's a fairly similar, progression, except it goes a little bit further. Now you can upgrade armor and weapons to plus 12. Um, the thing is, to get the items to get to plus 11 and plus 12, you have to beat the new bosses, um, and or some heroic content. There's a few.
Yeah.
I believe it's called dark matter, where you need to use to upgrade it to 11 and 12, and that's there's also a few spots in the world where you can find it. So it's not like only from those bosses, but it's mostly from them. Um, and we also wanted to have another reason. We wanted to incentivize wanting to disenchant anything that's good or anything that's higher than plus 5. Players were
Hmm.
frustrated that you couldn't disenchant something higher than that into Immortalite. And the reason for that is because
Yeah.
I didn't want to disincentivize beating heroic bosses. The only
Okay.
way to get heroic, Immortalite is from heroic bosses or in a few spots in the world. Um, and so instead, if you disenchant an item that's higher than plus 5, you get a new item. It's called Armor Scrap, which you can use to craft some new cool items. So you'll eventually want to get Armor Scraps regardless. Um, that
Okay.
said, we are also giving away a lot more Immortalite in the main game. We felt like we weren't giving enough. Um, and
Okay.
now that there's something higher than plus 10, it feels less dangerous, uh, to be giving away Immortalite. But yeah, we just wanted to make sure that heroic bosses had a reason to be there. Um, so yeah, but that's a progression now.
Sounds like there's also going to be the DLC is going to include tier like 4 and 5 gear. It's
Yes.
going to have an even higher level of gear that's like new game plus gear, I assume, sort of
Yeah.
realm for like tier 5.
The uh the the tier 5 is only craftable with with a lot of armor scraps. And a
Okay.
lot of like new items that you find in the world. Um, and the
Okay.
idea is that the tier 5 is for like new game plus essentially. You could do it in
Okay.
the main game, but it's just going to require a lot of effort. Um, but tier 4 is I believe what you get from the new heroic bosses. Um,
Okay.
actually, that's I need to double check, but it's something like that.
Mhm. Okay.
I,
Yeah.
yeah.
One other thing I was curious about the different game modes in the DLC. That's something that I was excited to learn that there's going to be. I guess there's 4 new game modes that I've heard about. I wasn't sure if you could explain those if all those are making it in or what you have in store for different game modes.
So yeah, so the game so there's definitely a few that'll make it in. Um, you know,
Mhm.
I think there was one called Heroic Forest, which which was
Mhm.
just for me. I literally made it for me. I don't know. I just like the idea that like you cannot progress until you beat the heroic version of that boss. Um, that's basically what that mode does. It's stupid
Okay.
hard. There's also an item randomizer mode, which basically makes it so every item that drops is randomized. You can get anything. Um,
Okay.
but so when we tested it in the beta, it was a little bit too easy to get like really geared up early. So we're tweaking it a little bit to a little bit more to make the run interesting. Um, so yeah, it is randomized, although there's some curation done as to what items drop where. But yeah, it's
Okay.
very randomized. And there was another one, which was I believe Madness mode. Um,
Mhm.
which is also really cruel and sadistic, where you can only equip and unequip items next to a save point, um, and if you die, those items get destroyed. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I believe they get destroyed except weapons. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, and I know that there's also mention of a Fink mode where which sounds really
Yeah,
chaotic.
we I want to get that in, but it's not fully fleshed out yet. I The thing is, it it works. Um, we're just trying to put a lot of Fink jokes everywhere. Like Owl King, whenever he does like his portal attack, a bunch of Finks come out of it, and like there's a lot of bosses where like Finks will just come out of everywhere. Like, um, there were other silly things um, that we're doing in that. It's just a joke mode with tons of like silly stuff happening. And if we release it as it is, it'll be okay. But I want to do it a little bit more justice. So it needs a little bit more time and love. But we'll see if it makes it in.
Yeah, and you can enable multiple modes at the same time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I guess that's even more to consider what what happens when you combine Fink with Heroic Force.
Yeah. It would be insane.
Yeah, so yeah, that sounds really cool. It's just another thing that sort of inspires around like randomizer mode.
Yeah.
Sounds really fun. I love why I love doing those in Dark Souls with sort of the mods and just seeing what sort of crazy stuff you're forced to work
Yeah, I
with.
agree. I love that stuff. If the game really, I hope it does really well. We believe it's amazing, so we just hope it
Mm.
gets the attention it deserves. If it does, I would love to do like a room randomizer too, where you could like basically end up
Oh
anywhere.
yeah. So left, I have a few miscellaneous questions. I actually got some from community members from the Discord for Death's Gambit, and then just a few other questions. One is it's not really a question to start, but I noticed you could pet rabbits and you can pet Cusith now, which I think is really adorable. And
And you
which
can
is there?
rub the belly of the giant rabbit too now. I haven't posted a gif of that, but that gives you a luck
Yeah.
buff.
That's awesome. Can we expect like other just like sort of cool touches like that? It's
Yeah.
already something that I really enjoyed about Death's Gambit was these really creative, clever sort of like, can I do this moments? And it's always fun when the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're like scratching the bottom of the barrel of ideas, we finally get to add a
Yeah,
lot of the really silly, dumb stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of fun, silly situations and interactions. Um, Hopefully,
yeah,
I get to add as much as I can. We'll see. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That sort of on that tangent, I have a few very silly questions from the Discord, but Knox from the Death's Gambit Discord asked if you'll be able to bongo with Zuma.
um, there's no bongo minigame, sadly. It would take a lot of effort, and we're already adding a million things in the game. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it is a big meme in our Discord, so maybe I'll add something or at least a joke related to it. But as of right now, there
Yeah.
is no way to bongo with Zuma, sadly.
All right. Yeah. And and Seath from the Discord wanted to know if in addition to all the systems you're adding, if you can turn it into a dating sim and date with death.
So even more than the bongo, I do think that might be something we want to do. There is a a little cutscene that I haven't finished, what I want to do, which involves like a dating situation. Or it's
Mm.
a joke cutscene, but still,
Yeah.
I'm working on it. It's not dating with death. It's
Yeah.
different, but it's uh it's just something funny I want to implement. Um, so if you want some sort of dating cutscene or minigame thing, there might be something for you in the DLC, even if it's something small and silly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And then Dr. Diente from the Discord wanted to know they really want to one shot bosses.
What?
Is there going to be anything that's overpowered enough to one shot some bosses?
What?
Which I was imagining one shotting Amalvaro, which is not a short fight, and I was like, I don't know what combo you would need in order to do something like
Sadly, I don't think there is like a one-shot mechanic. I mean, you could hack the game. I don't know.
that.
um,
Yeah,
if yeah, I mean, if you want an easy mode, I don't know, hack the game and make yourself, you know, God.
yeah. So it's safe to assume the talents aren't so overpowered in any combination that you'll be one shotting
I
any
sure hope not.
bosses.
If not, we'll find it in
Yeah.
the beta and patch it out. But yeah, or I mean, patch it before the game comes out is what I meant to say. But yeah.
And then and then Damien of White Feather Mail from the Discord asks, how much longer do you expect the average playthrough to be after the DLC?
So if you're doing all the optional content, so let's say the original game is about 10 hours, according to howlongtoplay.com. um,
Mhm.
it takes about 10 hours. I would say it's gonna take about maybe like 16 hours, 17 hours, probably. It depends how much you do. Um, actually, it might take a little bit longer. I honestly haven't timed it, but
Okay.
the main playthrough isn't much longer if you do know of the none of the options. I would say it's maybe like an hour and a
Okay.
half longer, and then
Okay.
if you do the optional stuff, it could be like double the time. I mean, depends how much trouble you have with some bosses. Again, the world's like 50% bigger. Um, and let's say the heroic bosses, you haven't done those. Just doing the heroic bosses alone in the main game takes like double the time of like beating the main game.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That sounds awesome. Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of new stuff to go
It's
exploring, whether it's,
yeah.
the area, the talents. There sounds like there's just a ton of incentives to sort of keep playing. All right. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Uh, well, I mean, nothing super particular. I just wanted to say, I could go a little bit more in depth into like the old areas, what changes we've done. As I said, the order of levels has changed a little bit. Now you go from Gaine's Cradle to Central Sanctuary to Alduin, um, as opposed to fighting the Phoenix Rider in Obsidian Vale. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, after you beat the Sniper boss, I think then you can do Phoenix Rider and Darkness Falls and stuff like that.
Okay.
And during that, you'll actually figure out that also the Alduin sewers is enormous now. It used to be like just a small, you know, line. It's just basically like a long
Hmm.
line, but now it's actually fairly complicated and it connects a lot of areas. Um,
Okay.
and it connects to Darkness Falls, which is a little bit bigger too. Um, uh, and from yeah, I mean, I from there you might actually start finding some of the new areas too. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I guess I could leave it there, but yeah, that's sort of the changes to the order. Um, I think I'm super happy with the changes we've done, and I hope the fans feel the same way. Um,
Yeah.
Originally, I was like, well, maybe people won't like that I made the bulwark a little bit easier, but honestly, we added a whole huge level before him, so I
Yeah.
think it'll be okay. We didn't really nerf any particular bosses. We
Mhm.
only the only one that we had to was the bulwark. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and then thank you so much for all your time and the information. And yeah, I'm very excited for the DLC, and I'm happy that you could come on and give an update and talk about all the ton of stuff you're working on.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's fun to talk about it. It's a nice break. I'm crunching right now, so it's just a nice little break from this.
And that is what we know about the gameplay and mechanics of the Death's Gambit DLC so far. I'd like to give a huge thanks to Jean for taking the time to talk with me and share information about the DLC. And I'd like to give a big thanks to you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give a like and consider subscribing to the channel and checking out the other development videos I have. And ding that bell if you'd like first dibs on viewing my videos as they come out. Thanks for watching.